Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sergey, I'm a freediving instructor trainer, and on this channel I'm sharing with all of you guys everything what I know about freediving. So if you are beginner or intermediate freediver, subscribe to my channel because you're gonna find a lot of useful information here. And today I want to talk about DCS in freediving, which stands for Decompression Sickness in freediving. It's going to be a two-part videos. Part number one is going to be about decompression sickness in general, and part number two is going to be about decompression sickness in freediving specifically. So my main knowledge about decompression sickness coming from my scuba background. I used to be a scuba instructor for 4 years, and everything what I'm going to talk now it's from my scuba experience. So what is a basic idea of decompression sickness in scuba diving? 79% of the air which we are breathing is nitrogen. So when we start our scuba dive, the partial pressure of nitrogen is going to increase, and this gonna create diffusion from the lungs to the bloodstream, and then from the bloodstream into the tissues. So this is how nitrogen moves from your lungs, where you have now higher partial pressure of nitrogen, into the different tissues. So when you're going down, your body is slowly accumulating nitrogen. And what is going to happen when you're going to start your ascent during the scuba diving? Reverse process is going to happen. So at some point the partial pressure of nitrogen in tissues is going to be higher, and then it's going to move to the bloodstream, and then from the bloodstream it's going to move to your lungs, and then you exhale this nitrogen. So this is a really simple version of how your body accumulates nitrogen. So it's not one tissue which we have in our body, we have many different tissues. This is why the process is much more complicated. We have a so-called slow tissues, we have a so-called fast tissues. Different tissues accumulate nitrogen with a different speed and release nitrogen with a different speed. So this is why this process is pretty complicated, and this is why all scuba divers supposed to use the dive computer which calculate safe profile for their dives. And again, don't learn the decompression sickness for scuba diving from this video. If you are interested in scuba diving, just go for scuba course and your instructor going to teach everything what you need to know about decompression sickness. So the chance to have a decompression sickness even scuba diving is pretty low. However, it's possible. Again, it's possible. This is why all scuba divers need to follow a specific procedure. Let's say safe ascent rate. They have to always check how long they can spend on different depths, etc., etc. So what exactly is a decompression sickness? Decompression sickness, it's for example when scuba divers start his ascent too fast, or when he spent too long at certain depths, and then on his ascent these nitrogen molecules gonna combine and form the bubbles, and then these bubbles is what cause the decompression sickness. So the bubble formation doesn't guarantee decompression sickness. This is what in decompression theory we call silent bubbles. Not all bubbles lead to decompression sickness. However, this is a general way how divers can have a decompression sickness. So when they're ascending, molecules of nitrogen combine, they're gonna produce bubbles, and then these bubbles can create different damage. Depends where the damage created, there is a different types of decompression sickness. So for example, type number one, which we can call bends, it is when decompression sickness happens in the skin or in the muscles or in the joint. For whatever reason, more often it happens in the shoulders area, and usually it is pain in this area, so pain in the joint, maybe rush in the skin, and again this is why we call this bends, or sometimes people call it skin bends. So among all of these types, this one is the less dangerous. However, again, this is a decompression sickness, and of course you want to avoid it. So type number two, it is when decompression sickness affects central nervous system, and this is a much more dangerous decompression sickness type. So the small symptoms can include fatigue and maybe headache. So this is the most common symptoms, but there is a bigger symptoms such as paralysis and ultimately death. So this is why type 2 decompression sickness is much more severe, and again should be avoided by any means. And there is also type 3 decompression sickness. It is when there is some combination of decompression sickness and air gas embolism, and this is most complicated, and it's also not that well known compared to other two. So this is 3 types of decompression sickness. Like I said, type 1 is less dangerous, and type 2 and 3 is more dangerous, and again should be avoided by any means. There is also some factors, personal factors, which can increase the chance of the diver to have a decompression sickness, such as fatigue, such as excessive body fat, dehydration, cold. There is some more like age or excessive exercise right before the dive. These factors can increase the chance to have a decompression sickness. Okay guys, so this is like a general idea how decompression sickness happens. The treatment of any of decompression sickness is pretty much the same. You need to deliver pure oxygen for the person who have a decompression sickness symptoms. This is why always on the boat, both scuba divers and free divers are supposed to have pure oxygen. As soon as there is a chance of decompression sickness, so the divers need to immediately start breathing pure oxygen, and this diver need to be transferred as quickly as possible to the special recompression chamber, where there is a special medical professionals who gonna deliver a special procedure how to remove this nitrogen, excessive nitrogen from the diver's body in a safest way. So guys, this is a general idea about decompression sickness, and now let's talk about decompression sickness in freediving. Okay guys, and now let's talk about how decompression sickness can happen with the freedivers. The first one is not actually freedivers, it's spearfishers, but you will get the idea. So imagine there is a spearfisher who planning to do spearfishing, let's say for 4, 5, 6 hours. Each single dive is not going to be super deep, let's say 20 meters. So this is a not crazy deep dives, but this spearfisher is going to do many dives in a row over these 4 and 6 hours. What is the problem? The problem is too many dives. So each dive is gonna create some small accumulation of nitrogen in a different body tissues. Remember we was talking that there is a slow tissues in our body, the tissues which accumulate nitrogen slowly, but they also release nitrogen slowly. So probably these tissues is gonna still have some extra nitrogen even after like sufficient surface interval. And also, do you remember we was talking about different factors which can increase decompression sickness in different persons, such as fatigue. And if you do spearfishing session for 4-6 hours, obviously you're gonna get fatigue. Also excessive exercise, also dehydration, also cold, etc, etc. So all of this can result that the spearfisher or freediver is gonna have decompression sickness accident. How to avoid in this situation? Pretty simple. Try to limit your spearfishing session over maximum a couple of hours. Make sure that you stay hydrated. Make sure you have proper thermal protection, proper wetsuit. Make sure if you feel tired, you finish early. And then this is going to help you to avoid decompression sickness while you're doing spearfishing session. The second situation, it is when freedivers try to do kind of CO2 table in the ocean. So if you're watching my videos regularly, you learn a lot about different CO2 tables, but all of these tables was done in a pool. But some freedivers, even elite freedivers, like to do these CO2 tables in the ocean as well. So what is the CO2 table? It is when recovery is relatively short. So let's take an example. There is some good freediver who is going to dive maybe 30-40 meters, which is again not that super deep. And then maybe even do a hang there, and then come up, have a short surface interval and dive again. And then do it maybe 5, 6, 7 times. So this kind of situation easily can lead to decompression sickness as well, and we have an example a couple of years ago when one of the elite freediver had decompression sickness during such training. And the problem with this training is this surface interval is too short compared to the dive time. So remember, if you want to avoid decompression sickness, you need to have a long surface interval. There was a video about surface interval, check it out, the link is going to be in the description. But generally you want to have a like 3-4 times longer, like generally you want to have a surface interval 3-4 times longer compared to your dive time. So in my opinion, CO2 tables should be done in the pool but not in the ocean. And then the third reason for decompression sickness in freediving, it is when freediver diving too deep. So what is the definition of too deep? It's hard to say at the moment. It looks like that when freedivers diving with bifins or monofin, current world record is 130 meters, it looks like this depth is more or less safe in terms of decompression sickness. However, if you are looking at the no limits diving, when people diving deeper than 200 meters, then the chances of decompression sickness are significantly higher. And again, we have one tragic accident, maybe it was more, but one quite popular, quite famous tragic accident which happened with Herbert Nietzsche when he was attempting to do his world record attempt, 220 something meters, and then on his way up he had a decompression sickness, like massive decompression sickness, probably type 2. And then this story luckily have a happy ending because he recovered almost fully. So he have a good health as far as like I'm concerned. He's an active person, but again, such deep dives can easily lead to the decompression sickness. But these are 3 main reasons why freedivers can have a decompression sickness. So one of the reasons when the session is too long, even with the shallow dives, and again, this kind of diving probably gonna also include some form of dehydration, maybe tiredness, cold, fatigue, etc., etc. So the second reasons to have a decompression sickness might be if freedivers attempt to do a CO2 table with a short surface interval in the ocean. And then the third reason, it is a no limit diving when the freediver is diving extremely deep. So once again, how we treat decompression sickness in freediving, totally the same as in scuba diving. We provide pure oxygen as quickly as possible. This is why, again, even when you do freediving, oxygen is supposed to be on the boat. So if you're diving in a new dive center, just double check that they have oxygen, especially if there is people who diving relatively deep, then the oxygen is just must have on the boat. And the second one, it is when this person who have a decompression sickness, after he breathes pure oxygen, he needs to be as quickly as possible delivered to the medical facility, which have a recompression chamber, and then this person gonna proceed to a special treatment in this recompression chamber. So this is why if you are maybe already a really deep freediver, if you are checking your next freediving destination, you can also double check how far away recompression chamber from the place where you're supposed to dive really deep. Okay guys, this is it. This is all about decompression sickness. If you follow simple rules such as don't have like super long freediving session, make sure you're not tired, make sure you're not dehydrated, make sure you have enough surface interval, etc., then decompression sickness can be avoided. However, just make sure that there is oxygen on the boat and there is a recompression chamber somewhere nearby where you can be delivered in case of emergency. Okay, this is it. I hope this video was useful. If it was useful, don't forget to click the like button and I will see you next time.